So sometimes it's the most inconsequential thing that can start you on a journey to become a force for climate good. Perhaps it's this that might have been stuck in the nose of a sea turtle. 500 million plastic straws are discarded in the US every day. 500 million. Maybe it was a video on plastic straws that did it for me, or maybe it was this youth climate activist who had so much to teach me. Yet I'm here today to learn, connect, and give what I can so we can advance solutions on climate change. Hello, everyone. I'm Rhonda Bannard. I am the founder and executive director of Earth Gives, and we are a nationwide nonprofit focused on building a community of Earth givers. Because did you know that only 2% of all philanthropy goes to climate and environmental nonprofits, and only 0.5% to climate justice organizations? The opportunity and the siren is calling us. As part of Earth Gives Day, we host Power Hour programs, learning sessions presented by the nonprofits participating in these power hours. Our goal is not to invite you in for a transaction, but instead to transform your actions through knowledge and inspire you to pivot some of your generosity to climate concerns. So let's get to it. We will kick off the program with a quick look at a deeply local effort in New Hampshire. And then we're going to get into the main presentation from a group coming from out of Vermont, yet with national grassroots advocates. Then we're going to open it up for questions and answers, do a quick wrap, and then send you out into breakout groups where you're going to be able to connect with one another, have a conversation, make some commitments, and then get on your way to climate action. So when you go to Earth Gives, you're going to find other nonprofits that are working on a variety of issues related to plastic and other critical initiatives, from coastlines and waterways, including the Coalition to Restore Coastal Louisiana, the Oregon Shores Conservation Coalition, Winyah Rivers, the Black Warrior Riverkeepers, and many others, to those that work at the intersection of health and climate, including Defend Our Health and the Arizona Health Professionals on Climate Action. No matter what, explore, learn, and give. So now let's get smarter on plastic. So it's Matt's fault. Matt Howe is the executive director of one of the nonprofits presenting today, and he introduced me to Jill. Jill is a molecular biology nerd, and I'm not reading her bio because there are words in there that I can't even pronounce. So she got her degree in microbiology and molecular biology with a minor in chemistry. And then she spent 10 years working in academic research at the Geisel School of Medicine at Dartmouth College. In 2018, she got a certificate that made her even smarter, and now she is the water quality coordinator for the Green Mountain Conservation Group. And her love for dogs knows no bounds, and I'm sure some of you can relate to that. So following Jill, we're going to hear from Dr. Megan Wolff. She is the Health Policy Director at Beyond Plastics. By training, she is a medical historian. She loves looking for the root of an issue to explain how a problem started, and then she goes hunting for policy solutions. So what drew her to environmental policy came from the most pressing public health issue: climate change. At Beyond Plastics, she trains volunteers to engage with policymakers and others to take decisive action against plastic pollution. She served on the Minderoo-Monaco Commission on Plastics and Human Health and compiled a major report to demonstrate the health impacts of plastic. She also teaches a class at Bennington College. There's so much wisdom here tonight, so let's get started. We're going to begin with Jill Emerson. Take it away, Jill.
Great. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me tonight. That was a really awesome intro. I appreciate that you introduced me as a science nerd or a molecular biology nerd, because I am essentially that. I had a little bit of a weird trajectory. I didn't start my career in conservation, and yet here I am in conservation. And before I delve into very quickly what I'm going to show you tonight, I just want to ask the classic Zoom question of, can everybody see my screen? Great. Okay. Because I feel like it's not a Zoom meeting unless you ask that question. So as mentioned, I am the water quality coordinator and staff scientist at a very small nonprofit organization called Green Mountain Conservation Group. Despite what our name sounds like, we're not in Vermont, we're actually in New Hampshire. That is confusing to people when we say Green Mountain. We get that all the time. If you don't know where Green Mountain is, don't worry. I barely know where our organization is as well. We're actually on the border between New Hampshire and Maine. And we're a very small nonprofit. We are 4 people strong, and we have up to 4 AmeriCorps members annually. So we're really a grassroots organization that was founded in 1997. So our focus is primarily in water conservation, but we are looking to protect the greater natural resources of our watershed, which is mostly made up of 7 towns, but has 14 towns in it with partial land in our watershed. So we believe in healthy water, healthy community. And so our organization stands on the pillars of research, education, advocacy, and land conservation. And so it spells REAL. And in 2018, we opened up our brand new center, which you can see there down in the corner right. And like I mentioned, here is where our office and our work is located. So right on the border between New Hampshire and Maine, I can literally see Maine outside my office window. That's how close we are. So our watershed is split evenly in half, and we do work both in Maine and New Hampshire, but we probably prioritize New Hampshire just a little bit more since that's where our office is. And so as I'm sure many of you know, and what we'll be hearing inevitably tonight, is that we have a plastics problem. And what I thought would be interesting is to sort of highlight how a really small grassroots nonprofit is taking on this big global issue of plastics. Because again, we are 4 people working on this global problem. And I'm sure many of you know the history of essentially how we got here, but I wanted to quickly blitz through that. We basically started using plastics at the end of the 1800s, with bakelite being the thing that we use the most in housing. Once houses started to get electricity, we needed something to insulate the wires, and that's where our first real use of synthetic plastic came into use. Obviously, shortly after this, we had World War II, where we had warfare, where harvesting natural resources was not practical for us to do. We needed to have things quickly, and so we switched to manufacturing in plastic. And basically, post World War II, we haven't gone back to the using natural resources mentality of we've just used plastic to replace a lot of natural materials. And especially from the 1960s onward, we've significantly increased our plastic usage every year. We're over now 400 million tons of plastic per year. Obviously, my graph only goes up to 2017, but that's a lot of plastic. Each person uses about 500 individual plastic bags. If you've not seen the Jeb Barrier movie Bag It, I highly recommend it. It's a great watch to learn about single-use plastics, particularly those plastic bags that we see in grocery stores. And then down below is just a little chart of how long those plastic things exist once you use them. So they don't really go away. And if you're wondering where you might find plastic out in the wild, the answer is literally everywhere. Unfortunately, there is no place on Earth that you can go that does not have plastic. So there's pictures of plastic bags rolling around in the bottom of the Mariana Trench. Mount Everest is obviously littered with single-use plastic items to the point where now Nepal is looking to, if they have not already, banned single-use plastics from going on expeditions. And the North and the South Pole have had a couple of different studies done where you can find plastic in the water, in the snow, in the ice. And just to gross you out, if you hadn't thought about this before, which I'm sure many of you had, you also have plastic in you. So if you eat, drink, and breathe, you have plastic in you. If you don't do those things, eat, drink, and breathe, could you stay on after the end of this? Because I really want to talk to you to see how you're surviving as a human. So we decided that we wanted to see what types of plastics we could find in our own environment. Knowing what we know of where it's everywhere, we assumed correctly that we were going to be able to go out and see plastic in our natural environment. And we wanted to be able to utilize this as a tool for teaching others, because what we were finding is for our situation in New Hampshire, the global plastics problem is a little intangible, particularly for kids in that age group where it's really impressionable, that 4th through 6th graders, where they're really starting to figure out who they are and what they're going to stand for. Talking about like the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, 4,000, 5,000 miles away, doesn't really, it's hard for them to relate to that. So we wanted to bring a study closer to home. So we developed our microplastic survey program, where we looked at water in the biggest lake in our area, so which is Lake Ossipee, is the 6th biggest lake in New Hampshire. So we started to do surveys on Lake Ossipee and her bays to see what we could find for plastics. A lot of this work was done by our AmeriCorps crew. So we've had AmeriCorps for the past 6 years at our office, and they've been instrumental in helping us launch this program. So you can see on the right, lots of pictures of our AmeriCorps in action. We take out a big manta net. His name is Manty. So he drags through the water and he's collecting plastics behind the boat as we go. We looked at plankton samples to see how much plankton might be consuming microplastics in particular. And then we also looked at sediment samples around on the shorelines to see historically how much plastic Lake Ossipee had accumulated. And we're doing it from a really neat system called Nile Red, which is a technology that has been co-opted by the microplastics community. So Nile Red is this reddish purple stain that originally was used to stain fat cells, but now is being used to stain plastics. When you add Nile Red into your water sample, it will bind to the plastics that are in there, probably through non-polar interactions. So water is polar, lots of plastic, not all plastic, but a lot of it is non-polar. Then the dye wants to adhere to things that are non-polar. So you end up with this dye that sticks to this plastic. And then when you do an excitation with a really bright blue light, like you're fighting crime or like you're a CSI crime scene explorer, when you excitate with that blue light and you filter through an orange filter, you get glowing fluorescent plastics. So as you can see in the picture to your right, we have a control that doesn't have any plastic in it. That's been treated with our Nile Red under our blue light orange filter conditions. And then we have a spiked in sample where all of those yellow and orangey pinpricks that you can see there, that's all plastic that we added to our sample in order just to make sure that our system worked. And so from this, what we've been able to do is actually go out, we collect our water samples, and we're able to take all of these beautifully awful pictures of plastic in our water. And so up above, you can see what our full plate looks like. And then the pictures below are showing just different types of microplastics that we have found in the environment. So we're able to pick up micro beads, which are designed to be pretty small. And are typically in like cosmetics and toothpaste, but they can be in other applications. Microfibers, which are woven into clothing. The sweater I have on tonight has microplastics in it. And then there's some fragments to the far right, which are just used to be something bigger and is now something smaller. And so from this excitation, we're able to count these plastics and see what we can find in various bodies of water around us. And so only in 100 mils of water, which is about 3.5 ounces, which is not a lot of water, we're able to pick up conservatively anywhere between 27 to 65 pieces of microplastics per 100 mils. And we're being very conservative when we count. We are trying to see if we think something is, sometimes biologicals are picked up in our survey, or if we're not quite sure that it's plastic, we don't count it. So if anything, we're probably underreporting the amount of plastic that we have. This is all very cool, but essentially without advocacy, education, and outreach, all of these types of surveys that we do are somewhat meaningless. So the other thing that our organization has done besides take on surveys in our area is we've taken these surveys on the road, essentially, and we've taken them to different school systems that will go out into rivers and collect their own or do their own microplastics collections. We've gone to summer camps. We've been to farmers markets, and we bring this Nile Red technology to the students in their school. So you can see below, we've got students doing our Less Plastic Initiative programs, of which our guide is on our website free for everybody to use. It has all the next generation science standards on there as well. So we're trying to make it really easy for educators to take what we've learned and bring it to their own school systems. And if you don't have a Nile Red system, there's lots of other options for kids using microscopes in order to look at plastics. Like I said, in addition to our research, we're really trying to hit the ground with our education and our outreach, and we hit probably 400 students every year with our plastics education. And we have seen small incremental changes in our areas. There's a school that removed plastic foam trays from their cafeteria and had reusable plastic trays that they were using, which is still plastic, but at least they were reusable, so it was better. There's been pushes for local businesses have discarded or discontinued use of straws and have switched to paper alternatives. So we're hopeful that with our education, we'll continue to see those small changes, which will add up to hopefully bigger solutions in the long run. That's pretty much all I want to talk about because I'm just the opening act for the main attraction. But I encourage you to visit our website. And of course, I'm going to be on in a breakout session if you have more questions about what we do. Here is all of my information. Our website is gmcg.org, and we have Facebook as well. And feel free to come and check us out and drop me a line if you want to hear more about the research that we do at a very, very small nonprofit in the middle of nowhere, New Hampshire.
Thanks, Jill. That was wonderful. Megan.
Hey, hi. Let's see, I'm sharing my screen here. Looks like it's right there. Okay, we'll go to slideshow. The other thing someone always has to say on the Zoom is, I'm not muted, right? Okay, not muted. Excellent. Well, thank you for inviting me. That was actually the perfect opener, Jill, because you covered a bunch of things that I was going to talk about, and now I don't have to, so I can get scary about plastic pollution about other things. It's got its pluses and minuses. I too work at a small nonprofit. I'm at an advocacy organization called Beyond Plastics, which aims to end plastic pollution everywhere. We're ambitious, but we mean it because we see plastic pollution as a plume of the petrochemical crisis that's affecting all of us in so many ways. And it's a really easy plume to see and feel and touch, which means it's not that hard to recruit people who are interested in fighting it. There are not very many plastic pollution deniers. So it makes our work a little bit easy. Little bit of background about me. As was mentioned, I actually cut my teeth in history. I was a medical historian originally, and this has given me great, actually, cause for hope in terms of working in the climate fight and in the environmental fight. Because as a historian, what you come to understand is that history is not inevitable. People make decisions that cause things to happen. And you can look backward and you can often identify who they were, what those decisions were, and how things could have zagged instead of zigged. Problems that are not inevitable are solvable. And this is especially true in the climate crisis and very, very true of the plastics crisis. So I would not be working on a problem that I did not feel was solvable. I'm not enough of a masochist, got a high threshold for mayhem, but not for despair. So I am not despairing, and neither should you. That said, I'm going to tell you some things that are pretty upsetting. So hang on to your hats, because we're also going to talk about how to end this problem. So the problem, there are lots of versions of what the problem is, but at base, the fact that we have about 10 billion tons of plastic produced since 1950, almost all of it is still here with us. Plastic is a synthetic material. It is not on the periodic table. It's incredibly strong and durable, and it doesn't go away. So it's still here. And a slightly different curve than Jill's, but not by much. It's just a little bit more fleshed out. We started having big problems really in the 1950s and into the 60s. That's not a big problem. But if you think back to where you were in maybe about 2000, yeah, there was plastic trash around, but it wasn't anything like it was today. Between 2000 and the present moment, we've made more than 56% of all of the plastics ever produced on this planet. The production curve spiked hard, and that had a lot to do with actually fracking and the availability of ethane that could be turned to ethylene for polyethylene. There's a little more to the story, though, but suffice it to say that the plastic pollution crisis, as we know it today, is incredibly recent. Another thing to think about, though, on this graph is that I do have mapped out into 2050 based on industry predictions. This is what industry says they are going to do. This is what they want: 3 times more plastic by 2050. Now, looking at this from a medical perspective, there's a lot of toxicology going on with plastic. Plastic is basically made out of carbon and chemicals, or fossil carbon, fossil fuels and chemicals. You're going to need a lot of additives to turn petroleum or ethane into a plastic fork. So lots and lots and lots of additives, and those additives are chemicals. So if we keep going with our chemical industry sales as projected, this is literally unsustainable for the planet. I don't just mean like we will have like a problem. This is unlivable. This is extinction level chemical endocrine disruptors. So I'll get into that in just a minute, but we need to stop this happening because this is not just a litter problem. This is a massive health problem that is going to get worse unless something dramatically changes in the petrochemical image of this picture. Now, a point of hope here, though, is again, this little bit here, 2000 to 2020 or 2024, is the lifespan of my cat. This is a cat that I had while I was in graduate school. She lived to almost 20. That is a really, really short-lived problem. So it looks existential and even extinction level. I don't play around with extinction, though. We're not going there because we can change this trajectory. This is very short. Also, I love this cat. All right, so here's the problem with plastics at base. The invention of the ship was the invention of the shipwreck here. Plastic is incredibly durable. It can be used in almost any capacity because it is literally plastic. The term plastic means malleable, and it's cheap to produce. Because it's so durable, it has properties. It's rain resistant. It can be used for so many different things. You would think that we would use it for essential items only, but instead we're taking a highly toxicological product that will last forever, and we are making single-use products out of it that have a lifespan of a minute to a year, mostly packaging. Here's what happened. Here's how that happened. Again, history, it's great. You could just look backward and be like, wow, here's the turning point. After World War II, when we're scaling up the use of plastic, which was really, really useful in World War II, it gave us the materials of war. Industry saw a domestic market and moved plastic into the home with Tupperware and all kinds of Malmac and dishware and that sort of thing. But eventually there was an end to the durable goods market. But by 1955, industry realized that it could have an evergreen market if you were trying to market things that were disposable, because plastic was so inexpensive, you could market incredibly cheaply, still make that margin, and get people to throw it out so they would be buying it and buying it and buying it and buying it. So this is the beginning of disposable living. And from there to the present moment, more and more and more things have become convenient and disposable, and spoiler alert, most of them are plastic. Well, what are they? Here's plastic production by sector as of 2015, mostly packaging. 42% of plastics under production right now are packaging. And packaging on the whole is used for between about 5 minutes and a year. At the outer end of the curve, you get about 5 years. Straight to landfill. or wherever else. And here is the wherever else, mostly landfill. Some of it is incinerated, which leaves you with 1 pound of toxic ash for every 3 pounds of plastic. So toxic ash, and quite a lot of dioxin, which is created when you burn plastic. Dioxin is one of the most potent carcinogens, period. It was an active agent, piece of Agent Orange. Mismanaged plastic is a euphemism for litter. And ocean plastics, this tiny little line here, is actually so much plastic that basically, like the bycatch of fishermen right now is about half plastic. Oceans are where we first became aware that we had a plastic problem, and yet that's this tiny little line. Recycled plastic, by the way, about 9% of all plastic has ever been recycled. In the United States, it's between 5 and 6%. So we got a lot of plastic, but that's not the only problem. Jill was talking about microplastics, and as we're realizing now, that is really the problem. Because microplastics, like all plastics, they endure and endure. Plastic will never break down in the environment. It can't. It doesn't decompose, but it breaks up into pieces that get smaller and smaller and smaller until they get to be so small that our detection methods can't even pick them up. Every time we increase our detection methods, we find more microplastics. So a microplastic is generally thought of as anything smaller than a pencil eraser, but nanoplastics get down to smaller than a human blood cell, and then smaller and smaller, smaller still. All plastic eventually becomes microplastic. The plastics that you're using, think of as if they had as if they were human skin, constantly shedding cells, constantly shedding microplastics. So what happens as they break down? Well, they get everywhere. They penetrate all of the living cycles of the planet, every ecocycle, and they already have. The horse is way out of the gate, because it turns out that the threat isn't just the plastic that we could see, it's what we couldn't see. And now we're learning how to look for it. So this microplastic filament on a snowflake practically says it all. It's caught up in the hydrologic cycle. It evaporates into air, into clouds. It comes down as snow and as precipitation, which is part of how it is that it is everywhere. It comes down and it's on the soil. It's also on the soil because it goes through us in the sewers, becomes part of sewer sludge, and then that's applied to soil. So agricultural soil can have about 23% more microplastic than water bodies. It gets picked up in the plants themselves. So this isn't just don't eat seafood because the fish might have microplastics. At this point, everything has microplastics. The entire food web has microplastics. And they just blow around. This image was taken of an insect in Adirondack State Park, 2023. Those of you who live anywhere near New York State know that Adirondack State Park is considered entirely pristine, or about as pristine as you can get. There is no plastic manufacture, there is no recycling plant, and I hope there's no major dump hiding somewhere in the Adirondacks. But this insect is completely coated in plastic. It got here, the investigators think, because it moves freely on wind cycles, in dust, in rain. So it's everywhere. And that being the case, as Jill was saying, we can be sure that we're eating it. If you breathe, if you drink, if you eat, you're ingesting or inhaling microplastics. They're kind of their new thing. Flour, sugar, coffee, tea, microplastics. So where are they going when we eat them? Well, we mostly pass them, actually. That's the good news, but not all of them. Some of them remain in the body, in the lung and the intestine, which makes sense initially because you're breathing them in, you're eating them. But as they get smaller, they can cross through the alveoli in the lung and across the intestine, at which point they're in the bloodstream and they're moving around the body, and they become incorporated in organs, liver, spleen, veins, breast milk, testes, heart, joints. We're looking around and saying, well, there's got to be some sort of a stop to this. There's got to be places that it can't get to. How about the human placenta, the fetus? It can't cross the placenta. That's a barrier. Not true. 2021, we find plastic on both sides of the placenta. I just spent the last 2 days at a plastics and health conference in New York City. 100% of placentas examined by investigators now have microplastics. That was 2021. In 2023, I was at a different plastics conference, and maybe it was 22, it gets blurry. That was when it was located in human blood. Those of us that were at the conference looked at each other and said, well, what about the blood-brain barrier? What we knew about the blood-brain barrier was that it was crossing it in the animal models, but there hadn't been any human studies that found that yet. However, this March, we did find it in the carotid artery, and in a big way. Investigators that were looking at patients who had their carotid arteries basically cleared of plaque looked at the plaque and found that 58% of their patients had nanoplastics in their arteries. They followed those patients forward and found a 450% increase in heart attack and stroke in the patients who had plastic. So plastic is a coronary problem. It is definitively threatening our heart health. Move forward a little bit to the present moment. This article is still in preprint. However, investigators have demonstrated that yes, it is crossing the blood-brain barrier. And how? This is what was really alarming about this. Not only is it crossing the blood-brain barrier, but the investigators who were looking at cadavers, they were looking at organ samples taken across a period of decades from different deceased people. And they found that as you get closer to the present moment, the concentration of microplastics in the brain increases and increases and increases. In the last 8 years, it increased over 50%. Predominant polymer was polyethylene. That's plastic bags. That's one of the ones that we've been making a whole lot of since 2000. And this is what's really spooking me. They're selectively accumulated there, meaning there were more microplastics in the human brain than any other organ of the body. And the thought here is that because plastics are so heavily chemical, a lot of the chemicals there are what's called lipophilic. They're attracted to lipids, they're attracted to fat, and they will stay anywhere that they can bind to the fat. The only thing fattier than the brain is adipose tissue itself. So that's why they think that they found so much in arterial plaque also. This is pretty spooky. So let's just take a mental health break for a minute here. These are my daughter's pet rabbits, Noelle and Lopsy. Just take a breath, exhale, and now we'll continue. What does it mean? This is what I was at this conference looking at, and I've also been on papers and study groups looking at it. And here is what we think it means to have microplastics in the body. First of all, yes, there's a physical component. You're not supposed to have these little particles in your body. They do cause inflammation. They do disrupt cells. In Petri dishes, if you put plastic next to living cells, the cells die. But in the human body, what are we looking at? Well, we look at microplastics in our bodies kind of like little Trojan horses, little chemical particles that are sitting inside us. And it's those chemicals that we're able to think about most carefully, because you can't go around dissecting humans and trying to figure out what just happened there. So we're looking at the chemicals and what we know that they do or are, and then what happens from that. There are more than 16,000 chemicals that can be used to manufacture plastic. 44,000 of them, plus or minus, are known hazardous chemicals, meaning they're carcinogens, they're neurotoxicants, or they disrupt hormones, or they do all of those things. Some of them are non-hazardous. We have no safety data whatsoever about about 10,000 of them. They have never been analyzed for safety in the human body. Those are the unknown unknowns, and those are the ones that we are particularly worried about. But those hazardous chemicals, that's worrying too, because what happens with plastic is it is not inert. We got used to it in our lives since World War II because, oh, it's stable and inert. It's plastic. What could possibly happen? It's just, you can just tap on it. Nothing's going on here. Nothing to see. Not true at all. Plastic carbon-carbon bonds give it the polymer backbone, and those bonds, and I promise this is the only chemistry slide you'll get, those bonds are covalently bonded. They are really, really hard to break, which is why plastic doesn't break down in the environment. Now, in order to give it all of its nice properties, to make it flexible or hard or pink or water resistant or not burst into flame or any of the number of things, you're going to add a lot of additives, 16,000 plus. Some of the ones we know the best are phthalates, bisphenols, PFAS, brominated flame retardants. I don't have time to get into what any of these do, but they are on the do not eat list. We'll just go that far. You don't want these things in your body. Those things just sit inside the matrix of the cell. They're not covalently bonded. They're very loosely bonded if they're bonded at all, which means that they leach out constantly through the life cycle of plastic. So if there's one thing you take away from this talk tonight, do not ever microwave any food in plastic, because the added energy will cause those additives to migrate out all the faster into your food. If it says microwave safe, they're talking about the plastic, not the food. And this is what we were talking about at the conference the last 2 days, is mostly the fact that so many of these are known endocrine disruptors. Now, your endocrine system is your hormonal system. It's the core of literally every biological process in your body, because your hormones are basically, they're governing the conversation that your body has with itself. And it's not just the fun ones like testosterone and estrogen, human growth hormone, thyroid hormone, insulin. This is all part of the hormonal system. The word homeostasis just keeps coming to mind, because if you disrupt this system, you can get any kind of outcome. And it's almost hard to believe, because there are so many. You just gloss over, like obesity, diabetes, cancer, more cancer, neurotoxic effects in infants, and so on and so on. So your endocrine system needs to work well. Just think of insulin and diabetes. That's what happens when it breaks. And very, very tiny doses matter a lot, particularly during great periods of hormonal change. And there's no greater periods, despite how you may feel going through puberty or pregnancy or menopause or any of those others, than early life. The timing makes the poison. So fetuses, newborns, and toddlers who are exposed to tiny portions of endocrine disruptors undergo vast changes, including there's a strong link between endocrine disruption and autism and ADHD and obesity. And we have the studies in mice. We're following them in people too, and they're tracking pretty close together. So here's a kitten. My cat had some kittens this year. It was the best thing that happened all year. It was great. Take a breath. Now we're going to get into solutions, but we have to go one more dark place in order to get there. And that is, why is this happening now? This is the historian's question. We need to figure out why it's happening right now in order to figure out how to undo it. This is counterintuitive. The climate crisis is actually a piece of this. Aside from the abundance of ethane and fracked gas, people are starting to move away from fossil fuels. We just had, the last July was the hottest July in 125,000 years. And every one of the 13 months leading up to it was the hottest of that month ever on record. These are incredible temperatures, and we're seeing what happens all over the world. We can't deny it. People are making changes, which is fantastic. Electric vehicles made up more than 30% of the new car market globally last year. Wyoming has now managed to produce more energy through renewables than it uses, and California is practically doing the same. So that's fantastic news, unless you are the fossil fuel industry, in which case you're looking for other markets. So they have been pivoting all this time because they pay attention. You got a lot of the smartest people in the room watching these markets, because you're looking at trillions of dollars in revenue and in economics. So they're pivoting to plastic as another thing to do with the carbon and with the petrochemicals. And they're building out. This is part of that curve that takes us up, 3 times more plastic by 2050. This is new infrastructure projects since 2012. That's a lot of infrastructure. You'll notice that it's mostly clustered here in the Gulf Coast and also in Appalachia over the Marcellus Shale, which in dinosaur times was a swamp and is now loose rock that is easy to frack, basically, and get fracked gas out of. So it's easy to think, okay, this build out is just happening where the resources are, right? Wrong. It's not. It's happening partially where the resources are, but mostly where people are not politically empowered or wealthy enough to fight it off. This is environmental injustice. New York is sitting right on top of the shale too. It's part of the same system. But New York had the political power early on to push back against fracking and ban it in this state. So what you're seeing is a segregation of pollution as well as humans in the United States. Much of this build out is happening in the same neighborhoods that are getting all of the worst of everything because people cannot fight it off, largely people who are very low income and people of color. Now, one last thing to think about with this, plastic is an environmental justice problem at both ends of its lifespan, from production to disposal, because what's happening to a lot of our plastic? Well, we saw that a lot went to landfills, but the stuff that's going into the recycling bins is getting sorted, and quite a lot of that actually, there's no market for it here. There's a lot of reasons for this, but it's being sent overseas to be sorted and hopefully to find a market there. So it goes on to container ships and it goes to resource poor settings, Indonesia, Malaysia, Turkey, and it's sorted by and large by women and children, women of childbearing age. And yes, all of the toxicants impact them too. They're handling it constantly. So it's harming people on all ends. So how are we going to solve this? Because we can solve this. Well, let's see. Recycle? No, we can't recycle our way out of this. There's too much plastic. Recycling never worked well for plastic anyway. It's too complicated. It's too chemical. Corporate promises? Nah, almost all of those get broken. The red lines are the corporate promises. The blue lines are their actual voluntary follow through on those promises. So not a lot happening there either. What are we going to do? We're going to turn off the tap with a regulatory solution here, because these systems are the most efficient and the most just. We don't have to wait around for somebody who's making a lot of money off of creating the problem to do the right thing, because we live in a democracy. We can regulate this. And that's actually how most things happen in terms of environmental improvement. This is the golden ring, frankly, for plastics and regulation, is a solution called extended producer responsibility. You make it, you take it. If you're a manufacturer, you have to have an end plan for what you're making plastic-wise. And it helps to not make it out of toxic chemicals in the first place. We are this close to passing this in New York State, where the EPR bill mandates a 30% reduction of plastic packaging over 12 years, meaning cap it. Don't keep producing so much plastic. You have to have a recycling rate for the remaining packaging, very high, 75%, and it bans toxic chemicals, the worst ones, from manufacture. This close, we have the votes. We're just waiting for them to come back into session. Other solutions that are regulatory that work are bans, plastic bag bans, straw bans, and there is great appetite for this. 12 states and over 500 cities and towns already have a plastic bag ordinance in effect. But we're all individuals here. We each zoomed in from our own screen. How do we do this? How do I pass a law? I'm reminded the first job I ever had out of college. I got a job at New York State Psychiatric Institute. I'd been an English major. And on the very first day of work, my boss said, we need an EKG machine. Go buy one. It's 1999. I didn't even have the internet. How's an English major going to buy an EKG machine? How is an ordinary person going to pass an EPR law? Well, this is where Beyond Plastics gets involved. This is our map of local groups and affiliates that we're building out across the country, because one of the things that we do best, we've got an enormous amount of policy expertise, an enormous amount of media savvy, but we're also really focused on drawing out the people who want to be in this fight, the grassroots, and teaching them how to use their democratic power, because your voice is so much louder than your dollar. But most people don't know that, because we've been taught that our choices in the supermarket are what's going to change everything. This is a map. We have 153 groups now. Took 2 years to get 153 groups. People are hungry to join. So if you are interested in finding other people that want to end plastic pollution with you, we can help you find them. And if you can't find them because you live in, say, Utah, and there's no group there yet, we've already trained over 1,200 people, and we have tens of thousands of people on our mailing list. We will find people in your zip code who are interested in doing this work and put them together with you. And a piece of what that looks like, our theory of change, the reason we're doing it this way, is that we find that change begins locally and it radiates out to the state and federal level. So those state bag bans, they start out usually as town bag bans, ordinances. Maybe they'll get up to a county level, but you get enough towns doing it that it becomes possible across the state. And then other states see it happen and they join too. And that's what we've been seeing with the bans in the United States. Gradually, you build up political will to pass it federally. So those local changes really make a difference because they demonstrate that it's possible and that it's wanted. And the other reason that we're doing it this way is that in the long run, people support each other. This is lonely work, as we all know, by ourselves or close to it on our Zoom boxes. But if you find people in your local area who are doing something that they care about and you care about together, that is what draws people together and keeps them going. And we know that it works historically. Yay, historian. Earth Day, April 22nd, 1970. This brought out 10% of the American public. 10%. It was the biggest mass movement in United States history. Yes, the Vietnam War was going on, so there was a lot of precedent. People were, getting used to coming out. But this was an environmental thing, and it brought out both sides of the aisle. And it was so successful that the Nixon administration created the EPA. And the EPA has been returning dividends ever since. The Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act are the two most amazing pieces of environmental legislation that we have ever seen. So we know when the people turn out across the country in their own areas where they have decided how they want to express themselves and what they need to talk about, government winds up listening because it's everywhere. So we'll also train you how to do this. I know there are some people on this call right now who have taken our trainings. I'm looking at you, Pamela, Tess, you're out there. I saw you. But we run these quarterly. I'm the trainings director, so you'll see a lot of me. You can sign up right now, actually. It's already open for the next series, which is in December. It's a 2-part training, 2 hours each time, and you don't have to take them in order. You don't even have to take them both in December. You can take it in December and then take it again, take the second part in February when we go again, or maybe it's March. But come on into these trainings, because in addition to finding out your zip code so we can connect you with other people, we'll train you skills, the kinds of skills that help you move that law, because this is our policy expertise. We know what's going to actually move the levers of power. We know how to contact your elected people or elected officials in the way that will cause them to listen. And so we teach you those methods. Like letters to the editor are actually a super strong weapon. You wouldn't believe it, but it really works. Organizing a call-in day where you and say 55 of your closest friends all call the same senator, that gets their attention. The difference between signal and noise on a call-in day is somewhere between 5 and 15 phone calls. So just a couple people, they won't pay much attention. But after 5 and certainly after 15, you have their ear. So we'll teach you how to do that in a coordinated way. We'll teach you how to visit with your elected officials step by step. There's no reason to be afraid of this, but if you've never done it, it's terrifying. So we'll walk you right through the whole thing, help you find them, help you make the meeting, help you go there and figure out how to ask for what you need. If you become coordinated with us, you can be a local group, which is one that is a group of people that organize together in their town, or you can be an affiliate, which is people who are already doing something, say they're the chapter of the Sierra Club, or they're a church or synagogue's green team. They just become an affiliate. It means we're all moving in the same direction, but you get to use the logos and you have a line straight to us all the time. And it looks a lot like this when you do the organizing. We call it kitchen table organizing. These are chapters all over the country that I've dropped in on from time to time. It's all pretty cool, especially good when you bring snacks. This movement is going and growing. The polling demonstrates it, and people are voting with their feet. 79% of voters across the aisle are interested in policy to reduce single-use plastic. This actually was a photo taken just last night here in New York City. People are angry and they want to take action. And this is how to do it and be efficient. Here it is again, because it cheers me up just to look at it. This is even better than looking at bunnies sometimes, I promise. Thank you very, very much for your attention. And I will stop share. Chasing it across the screen.
Wow, that is amazing. Thank you, Megan. That we so appreciate it. And Jill, so let's open it up for a couple questions, and then we're going to send everyone into a breakout session. So you have some time to talk about what your big takeaway was and what you're going to commit to do. So who's got a question for Jill or Megan?
I do have one.
Go ahead.
To ban plastics and prevent more plastic from being created, absolutely. I'm curious, for plastics that are still in the environment, both at micro level and macro level, are you seeing a lot of new technologies, new methods to remove those efficiently, effectively, and permanently?
No.
Okay.
No, that we consider that an end of pipe solution. Right now, we keep saying, like, if you're gonna, the bathtub is overflowing, before you start mopping up, turn off the tap. So our most important energy right now is to just stop that. There's the unnecessary plastics. Like, it's like hashtag not all plastics. I still want a bike helmet and a pair of glasses and like medical supplies, but we don't need so much of what we're making. And that's the tap we need to turn off. Then we're gonna do a lot of remediation.
Yeah. Thank you.
Audra?
Thank you so much. These have been wonderful and informative presentations. One question that I have is that when actually getting access to public officials and raising concerns about PFAS, the response is usually, well, the water company has conducted extensive testing and the level of PFAS that are in the water is actually at a safe level. And so I'm just wondering if anybody has any thoughts on how to counter that.
That's adorable that they think it's safe. That's so cute. One of the things about PFAS is, they comment, they call it a reference dose, right? Which is supposed to be like the dose that isn't harmful, except that the reference dose in Europe was dropped by a factor of 10,000 a couple of years back. It's actually so low that it's below the detectable line. If you can detect it, it's already way above the line. So part of what they're saying, oh, we can't find it, it's not a problem, is we use a lot of outdated technology in this country. So we're not looking very hard, because if you find it, you're going to have to worry about it. Now, our EPA changed our own acceptable level of PFAS in the water after Europe did it, basically because there's so much evidence, it's just completely undeniable now. But a lot of places are not yet using the right technology to detect it, or they're dragging their heels doing the testing because they know what they're going to find. Once they find that, they're going to have to upgrade the water treatment systems. It's a slow process. It's probably going to happen eventually, but you need to just keep pushing for testing. And this is the part where I don't actually have the answer. Like, I don't have the who you're going to call, but my colleagues do. And that's the fun part about being in an advocacy group like this, is like, go ahead and ask that question, and I can ask the right colleague and get the answer to you by end of day tomorrow, and then we're on it. So stay with us, because there is a phone number.
Thank you so much.
There was a question in the chat. What is PFAS in?
Us. Everything. So general biomonitoring demonstrates that it is in all humans, 99.8%. I mean, and then you can ask some and they'll just say 100. So PFAS has been used as a lubricant, an industrial lubricant. So any kind of like food processing that they need to move, like making Cheerios, or processing, if you're making, say, artificial turf, plastic grass and you're going to extrude that plastic and keep it from sticking together, that's PFAS. PFAS also makes things water resistant. So most of your outdoor gear, PFAS. Teflon is PFAS. And on it goes. It's kind of like plastic itself, where like, you're looking at things and you're like, oh my God, you're made of plastic too? I never would have guessed. Like, you have PFAS in you too? So it's almost impossible to avoid it. And, I think everybody wants to know, like, how can I personally protect myself, which is a very important question. But industry will also say, oh, it's your responsibility to protect yourself. You should really figure that one out. We're not going to tell you what we're putting it in, but you should, the onus goes on you. And that is incredibly disingenuous. So what's finally happening now is we've reached a sort of a tipping point now where the American public is becoming intolerant and pushing back hard. And even our regulatory agencies that had not acted for the last 30 years are beginning to move on this. So hopefully PFAS will be in far fewer things in the future. But right now it's, anywhere that you are going to find like a slippery, special like a lubricant, there's probably PFAS there. If it's waterproof, water resistant, probably PFAS there. And there are tens of thousands of different kinds of PFAS. So even if it says PFAS free, there are actually only 6 that really get analyzed. We're working on the whole family. I'm really fun, sorry.
Thank you. Well, we're going to move to breakouts, but before we do, thank you both to Megan and Jill, and hopefully they will be answering a few more questions in some of the breakouts that we're going to have. Earth Gives Day is going on through October 1st, so you have an opportunity to invest in these organizations that you just heard from. Hello. And
I have some questions.
well, we're going to continue in our breakout, so just hang tight.
But
And
these are questions for Dr. Wolff and for Jill.
They're gonna both be leading a breakout conversation. So you'll be able to, Luann, let's try to get her in where they are. There are recordings of other power hours that we just had. The one on water in particular might be of interest because it does delve into this plastic pollution quite a bit from the Puget Sound Keeper and Food and Water Watch. So check those out at the same place where you registered for this. So thank you all for coming. It was lovely. Wow, I'm just like overwhelmed. I need to like take some of this in. But Luann, please send us out. And thank you for all your advocacy. And thank you to Megan and Jill. You guys were amazing. Thank you, everyone.